Chapter 19. Don't let them see you cry. Up, up, you Mukri rebels, on your feet. See what becomes of traitors? Watch and see. The sun was red in the east. Still heavy with sleep, the Bedouins were herded together to witness the death of Lachish. The little fortress city stood tight and proud on its high ground across the plain, surrounded by its deep wall of heavy brick and stone. On the wall and on the turrets, the defenders of the town had massed themselves with their bows and slings and fire sticks. Taharka's heart beat fast with sympathy and an unreasonable hope. Could they do it? Could they hold out? They were brave enough. Their walls were strong. The king comes forth. On a rise of ground above the tabernacle a throne had been raised, a high armchair of cedar wood carved with figures of slaves and captives, draped with rich cloth of purple from the city of Tyre. To the sound of trumpets, the massive folds of the great tent were drawn back, and Sennacherib the king came out into the light. Today he was apparelled as a king indeed, a fringed purple robe embroidered and shot with silver bracelets of heavy gold on his arms, purple boots on his feet, the high crown of Assyria on his head. His hair and beard were clubbed and netted and shone with gold and jewels. Rejecting the aid of his guards, he gathered up the skirt of his robe and hopped onto the throne, as jauntily as a boy vaulting a donkey. Once again Taharka was reminded of Shabbataka with his poise and self-confidence. The air echoed with the shouts of the soldiers. A spearman placed in his left hand the long, lithe Assyrian bow, and in his right the iron-headed arrow. The shouts had died away. The silence was broken only by the birds who, at least, seemed to be going about business as usual. Slowly, almost casually, Sennacherib fitted the arrow to the bow, sighting along the shaft like a man testing his weapon. He let the arrow fly. It found no mark, the king being positioned well beyond the range of the bowmen on the walls. But, as it pierced the ground below the city, a roar that shook the earth arose from the army of the Assyrians. There was no more silence. The air shivered with the sound of bulls' horns and trumpets of brass, and then the drums, and then, thrust forward from behind by the straining, quivering men of the infantry, with their groaning cries of heave, 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 the siege engines rolled out. Up the earthen ramps they crawled like giant beetles or warrior ants. Nothing could stop them. Arrows and rocks from the slings rained down from the walls. The giant guard shields turned them aside like toys. "The fire!" hissed Taharka, teeth clenched, shivering, as if there were a question as to how it would all end. "Where is their fire?" The defenders had fire, torches blazing with burning oil, fire bombs hurtling down upon the siege cars. The air began to fill with the sickening smell of smoke they remembered from Ascalon. A scream arose from one of the men guiding the rams. But every tower had its supply of water, and behind every guard shield stood a man whose only task was to douse the flames. The siege engines rolled on. Sennacherib nodded to the Tartan, who nodded to the high captain of the infantry. The drums thundered. The foot soldiers began to march, and flanking them, the bowmen artillery ran on ahead, crouching behind the shield bearers, dropping to their knees to take aim. The first of the Lachish defenders to die fell from the walls, slowly, it seemed, turning and tumbling in the air. Soon the air was full of those twisting, turning bodies, full of cries and shrieks of agony. "Gods! Gods!" whispered Taharka. "Why don't they come out? Why don't they meet them on the ground?" "Watch and see," said Amos bitterly. The gate had been opened. The men of Lachish poured out in their peaked helmets, swords and spears at the ready. Taharka could not hear, but he could see Sennacherib's laughter. With an almost good-humored gesture, he wavered toward a rise of ground not far away, and down they poured at his command. Not chariots, but men on horseback. For the first time, Taharka saw what they could do. Once in his childhood days he had seen a pride of lions closing in on a gazelle. The picture burned in his mind as he watched the horsemen of Sennacherib closing in on the line of men issuing from the gate of Lachish. A few of them broke away. The horses swerved as easily, it seemed, as men on foot, but so high and terrible above the helpless foot soldiers, hoofs trampling, their riders with swords already red with blood hacking down from those unsaleable heights. One man managed to dodge free, running out across the field toward where the Mukri caravan stood to watch and see. The horsemen held back a little, playing with him like cats with a mouse. Taharka thought he might make it and strained forward, his hands stretched out to draw him into the shelter of the little band. The Mukri were ready to fight for him, with sticks and stones if need be. But the horsemen, tired of the game, closed upon him and cut and trampled him down. And now the siege cars had reached the walls, the great jagged rams in place. Heave, heave, heave! Crack, crumble, crash. Bricks and earth poured inward. The giant stones groaned and tottered and fell. Great gaping holes appeared in the walls. Taharka closed his eyes. The town of Lachish was open to its enemies. The Assyrian infantry was running now, line upon line of men, spears leveled, thirsty for blood. The soldiers of Lachish were no longer soldiers. Like small terrified animals pursued by predators, they scurried here and there about the field, and the predators had no mercy. There were to be no war prisoners. Not one was to be left alive. Grim and businesslike, like market butchers, the Assyrians slashed and thrust. The chariots rolled across the plain, crushing all that stood or lay in their path, and the whole great army, as if according to some inexorable plan, now drew together, bearing down upon the gaping wall of Lachish. The sun was high. It had not taken long. The captive caravan was prodded forward, spears to their backs. Up, up, you Mukri, up to the wall. Watch and see. The horror had begun. The Assyrians poured through the breaches in the wall. Inside the city the fires had begun to burn, and a great mushroom-like cloud of black smoke rose and hung above the turrets and rooftops. The drums and the trumpets were still, and the cries of the people, one endless keening wail, hung in the air like the smoke. Then Taharka saw them, beneath the wall, through the breaches in the gateway, the sign of the Assyrians, the lifeless bodies thrust through and hanging high upon the long, sharpened stakes. "Stand tall, Sabi," said Taharka, for the little boy had quailed and tried to hide his face. "Don't let them see you cry." And, though trembling, the little boy stood stony still and watched the scene of terror. After a while the lines appeared on the ramps and the roadway, lines of women, children, young boys, a few old men, roped together and tottering beneath the loads of the wealth of Lachish heaped upon their backs. "Where are they going?" whispered Sabi. "Where will they take them?" "They will carry the robbers' loot as far as Nineveh," said Amos. "Those few who survive. After that, who knows? May God pity them, these people of Judah." On a gold washer litter, raised high like a god, Sennacherib the king had been brought up to watch and see. Slowly Taharka turned to look upon him. What would he see in his face? Pity? Regret for necessary severity? Hatred for the rebels? Cruel pleasure at their suffering? He saw none of these. Sennacherib looked bored. He had done a good day's work and wanted it over quickly so he could get back to the good dinner that awaited him in his tabernacle. Perhaps dictate a lecture to his favorite son, his little boy in Nineveh. Gods, thought Taharka, how I hate him! It was a deep and abiding hatred, and for a while he could not distinguish his hatred for Sennacherib from his hatred for his brother Shabbataka. The dead, most of the population of the little fortress town, had been hastily piled into a mass grave, a rock tomb south of the city. The smoke was drifting away. The tartan, flanked by his guards, tired and grim, walked restlessly up and down before the Bedouin caravan. "So, Mukri," he said, "you have seen. You have learned a good lesson? You will teach it well?" There was no reply. The Bedouins watched him, fascinated, exhausted, stunned by the terror of the day. "You are free to go," said the tartan. Dazed and stumbling, they struggled to their feet. "All but one," said the tartan. Taharka closed his eyes and dropped his sack. He had known it all along. "The Cushite boy," said the tartan. "The physician. The great king has use for him in Jerusalem." For a long moment he looked at Taharka, a measuring, searching look. Then he turned away. "The rest of you," he said, "move out." Sabi clung to Taharka. "I won't leave you," he said. "I can't leave you here to be killed." "They won't kill me," said Taharka. "I think they have another purpose in mind. And listen, Sabi, I have a job for you." He dropped to his knees, his hands on the little boy's shoulders. "You were right. They do want Hermes. The king wants him for his son in Nineveh. Hermes is a Nile donkey, a royal donkey. He must not serve the Assyrians. You must take him quickly, hide him among the pack animals, and move out. Now." And as it happened, the sun was not much lower when an Assyrian soldier appeared with orders to move the Cushite donkey to the king's temporary stables beneath the wall of the city. But Hermes was gone. Taharka saw Amos once more before the Mukrim caravan moved out. Amos made no offer to remain with him, but looked at him a long time, as if trying to convey a message. "I will see you again," he said softly, "soon, at Jerusalem."